the key defining thing between make or break in Champions League football. Everybody points to up here, to the brain.
A team is only as good as its individual people, right? So if you have everyone in the right spot and you make sure, okay, this person really match with this job, it matches their abilities, well, your team will be better.
Absolutely.
And ultimately your business. Yeah.
It's cognitive inclusion, basically. That I'm proud of what I can do, dare to say it.
Yeah.
But I'm also okay with the things that are not that natural for me. Yeah. I'm not ashamed or whatever.
No.
It's okay.
You start measuring this typical kind of human part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex housing these executive functions. And to be clear here, this is your thinking mind. It's your strategic decision maker in the brain. Without it, you basically cannot concentrate.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of the Neurolympics Podcast, where we believe that every brain's got talent. Let's give this a little round of applause, because we're super excited to start this podcast, the podcast of Brains First, the company that helps you make better talent decisions, powered by neuroscience. I'm Lucy, and I will be the host of this episode. Today, it's all going to be about how amazingly powerful the human brain is, especially in revealing someone's potential, and why you, everyone in your company, your athletic club, if you're tuning in today as a coach, or for yourself, should play exactly 4 games. We'll hear some fascinating stories from neuroscientists that once had a vision on the football field, and also uncover the neuroscience behind working or failing to work in contexts that allow you to thrive. Well, let's turn to our guests today, 2 of the 3 founders of Brains First, Elias Lichte and Andries van der Leij. You are, besides having founded your own company, experienced neuroscientists that, Andries, you teach at the University of Amsterdam, and Ea, you also research at the University of Amsterdam. Well, what else should I say then? It's an absolute pleasure, and I think also super special to have you both together on our very first Neurolympics episode.
Thank you. Thanks.
So before we go straight into the conversation, let's get the brains warmed up. Just as every Olympian, we're going to start with a little warm-up to get the brain cells going. So to ease you into the episode, I've prepared a few statements that I would like you to finish. Ideally with only like a few words or 1 word. Yeah? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. One thing I love about the brain is
that it always tries to predict what's coming. Actually, we... even as kids, we try to understand the environment and also try to predict a little bit what's going, because we want to do better next time, and that's so innate. It's really special.
Nice. For you, Ilya?
Well, I think if we're looking at this, the complexity of the organ, right? The 86 billion neurons having connections with up to 10,000 are neurons. It's massive computing power. So I think it's the most complex computer on the world. Nice.
Next statement. If I could have any super brain power, what would it be?
Well, I think for me, it would be total control over my neurotransmitters. So if I feel a bit down, up my serotonin levels, if I want focus, then, well, if you have control over your neurotransmitters, you can basically dictate your state of mind.
Amazing. I love that.
Actually, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe just one, if I can just pick one, just basically to shut it a little bit off once in a while. That's would also be quite nice. Actually, that never happens. Huh? It's always working, even when you're asleep, sometimes even more than when you're awake. But sometimes indeed we could do with a little bit less of it.
I like that as well. 2 more. A word to describe Ilya is...
Well, I think I'm a bit of a mathematical nerd. I really like to play with numbers, to program, to create games like we created in the Neurolympics.
Nice. Yeah. Andries, do you have a word for Ilya? How you would describe him?
I think one of the nice things is that he's pretty thorough. So whereas my words for myself would be almost hacky. Like I like to combine information and then flip it around and do something a little bit creative with it. But the nice thing about Ilya is he just pushes through and tries to make it work when you turn it around. When you look at all the perspectives, which actually makes us a good team.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You can complement each other. It's nice. So you already said the last statement is a word to describe Andries. So you said hacky. How would you describe Andries with one word?
Well, I think if you throw a problem at Andries, he basically always gets to the bottom of the problem immediately. And so in that sense, if you want some kind of advice or some kind of critical note, he basically does that, right? And he can very rapidly come up with it's probably a hacky solution, and then you can actually take it from there and finish it to actually make it work in any kind of context.
Yeah. Amazing. Love that. So I hope the brains are warmed up. Cool.
A bit, yeah.
A bit. So you're both neuroscientists. You obviously love the brain. You studied or still study the brain. Why is it so fascinating for you? Where does your love for the brain come from?
Well, for me, I think if you look at it, right, like if you put your two fists together, that's about the size of your brain. Mm-hmm. It's about 1.5 kilograms. So it's not a lot compared to your entire body mass, but it soaks up energy, right? Like almost 30% of your daily energy consumption goes to the brain. So it's highly energy intensive. And I think that's very special about it, that this is actually the most complex, the most energy consuming thing that directs everything throughout our body.
Yeah, it's true. It's crazy what comes out of the brain, even though it's such a small organ.
Yeah, and of course,
how powerful it is.
If we're talking about the phenomena it gives rise to, like this conscious experience that you can have, this conversation that we're having here, it's actually kind of magic.
Yeah. And for me, I always say it's also that we can imagine, that we can kind of travel back and forth in time with our thoughts and even our feelings. Like, I love that when I think back 5 years ago of like a very important experience, I still sometimes get goosebumps and remember the feeling I had. So I think this traveling back and forth and imagining also even situations we've never been in before.
Yeah. It's interesting how much detail can be in a vivid memory, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost the amount of complexity that's inside of your memories is incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and if I think about what basically triggered me into wondering actually how fantastic this instrument is, it's basically like what I said with learning. One of the things the thing I like most is art, music. And I was puzzled by how we actually, why and how we comprehend things like music and language. And what you see is actually that the brain, like Ilya said, consumes a lot of information, but we are actually also actively making little hypotheses about what's going on. And then the cool thing is that, for instance, good music, a good prose, basically almost follows your prediction, but just not. So it's slightly off, and then you're surprised, but what we are wired and what you see in young children, I have young children, that we basically are just actively searching for information, trying to understand it. And that's how we learn. So the brain is actually a enormous computer, basically actively searching for information to improve itself, which is a fantastic thing.
Yeah,
it's a prediction machine, and I think that without these predictive qualities, it would consume way more energy than it actually does.
Indeed. So it's both.
True, it's efficient.
It's a nice combination of being a sort of supercomputer and sort of wired for almost laziness as well, which is a fantastic thing.
Yeah, it's almost like it combines everything.
Yeah,
both sides of the coin. Yeah. And from your love for the brain, you developed a vision, and this vision started on the football field, right? What is the story and what is the vision?
Well, I think let me take on this one, and please interrupt whenever you feel like it. I just finished my PhD in neuroscience, in cognitive neuroscience, studying human awareness, and after that, it's like, okay, what's next? And then by, semi-coincidence, this guy, journalist, entrepreneur, walks into my office and he starts talking about all these stories, all these interviews he had with Champions League level football players and these top coaches that coach, for example, Barcelona or Real Madrid. And then it's always about like what makes or breaks this kind of top level football player. What does it take to become a Champions League level football player? And this incredible stories, two incredible books. But if you really ask them, like, what is the key defining thing between make or break in Champions League football? Everybody points to up here, brain. To the brain, right? And if you then ask, like, what is it? Yeah, it's magic. And this is like from a scientific standpoint, this is not something that you digest easily, right? You want to know what is so special about their brain. So that's actually where we started. And there we looked at the literature, all the stuff we did as researchers at the University of Amsterdam, and also what colleagues abroad do to devise this kind of test to start testing football players from, say, even 8 years old up to, the adult professionals. So by actually starting to measure parts of the brain, then you can actually map out what makes a Champions League level player special compared to, say, your average pro that still earn a living playing football, but not at the highest level compared to, say, an amateur. And that's where it all started.
That's super amazing. And then your vision wasn't confined to the football world, right? You also...
No.
Then,
indeed. So we were approached by Eric Castine, and he basically had this weird thing between what people said about what smart was and actually what he saw on the field. So he looked at football players and they were doing these things which were remarkable, and they're paid big salaries because nobody can do that, right? And at the same time, if we have a football player in front of a camera or in front of a microphone like I am, and you ask them questions, there was this thing where people just basically laughed at these guys for not being smart. And he
in a traditional sense of
his journalist mind was, how can these two things coexist at the same time? Ilya,
it's a genius question.
Was a colleague of mine, and we look at the world differently from an information processing perspective, like, how does reading work? Or how do you calculate stuff? Things like that, right? We ask ourselves these questions. And at the university, you have the luxury to basically research that by putting people in scanners, etc. And that's how it started. But indeed, we ended up with focusing on a part of how people process information and making these tests. And then we started discovering, like, okay, these executive functions, so basically the things that give rise to perceptions or decisions, are actually maybe important in other things as well. For instance, work, or not only in sports, but generally. And then we started off somewhere, and then we expanded from there, which is actually almost by chance that we ended up here.
Well, you could
Why
call it chance, but I think
it wasn't the aim from start.
No. But I think you start measuring this typical kind of human part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, housing these executive functions. And to be clear here, this is your thinking mind. This is the core of your conscious mind. It's your strategic decision maker in the brain. Without it, you basically cannot concentrate. You cannot juggle around ideas. So you cannot really think or decide anything. You cannot plan. So in any kind of goal-directed behavior, where it's strategic decision-making on the football pitch, where it's doing work as an air traffic controller, scanning a radar, or doing like a high-end consultancy for some firm, you always rely on this prefrontal cortex, this typical human part of the brain. And I think that's where actually, you can see that it has huge predictive power in any kind of context. And I think that's also what Andries was hinting at. It's all about context in which you thrive, right? So this apparently, I wouldn't call it a dumb football player before a camera, but you see this kind of highly intelligent behavior on the pitch, a very specific kind of setting of their prefrontal cortex, enabling them to do that at the highest possible level. And you need a slightly different configuration to become an air traffic controller or a police officer.
And it's also the specification comes from, practicing daily over and over the same skills, right? So it becomes kind of hardwired also the skills that you're good at.
Yeah, sure.
To make you kind of like an expert, right?
Absolutely, but it's both, right? So indeed, what we found is that almost all of these, the things that we measure are the basic building blocks of skills that everybody needs. So however, it's basically the specific combination of natural talents, what we call it. And what the context actually needs most, for instance, to be extremely fast, or to memorize a lot, or to plan very good, or to make decisions very swiftly without overthinking. Those kinds of challenges are different depending on specific context in sports, but also in business. That match, so basically the specific talents that a individual has, makes them more or less suitable for specific context. And then if you start learning, you will learn faster. I probably think it's more fun as well what you're doing, because you're rewarded, you feel that you're succeeding, etc., etc.
And I think we can make a nice transition here to off camera. You told me 2 stories from your own past that actually exemplify how you might end up at a job that really doesn't match your cognitive abilities, or that's not really suited for you to thrive in. So let's hear about your 2 stories, entering a working life and quickly realizing the jobs might not be the best match for you.
No, but you're young, right? I was still at high school, and then you want to earn some kind of living there to do fun stuff in your spare time. And at a certain point, I thought let's try to do something like bartending. Lots of my friends did that, and they said, there's an opening here, try it. I walked in, sweaty hands, mixing up all these mixed drinks, unable to have a proper draft, to make a proper draft beer. So I basically was fired within an hour. And I thought, okay, this might be a coincidence. So I tried it another time. Again, fired within an hour. So this is definitely not something that I'm up to. And I think I now the problem is I get so
how did that happen?
focused, and like if you ask me to do something or take up an order and it's just one thing, I might succeed, right? But if you order 4 or 5 things at the same time, and then somebody else actually interrupts me and waves at me, like I also want to order something, it becomes utter chaos in my mind. Like this kind of multitasking ability that some people are slightly better at than ours. Well, don't get me wrong here. Everybody is terrible at multitasking, but I really cannot do that.
So to break it down, it's really this cognitive ability of how you can kind of distribute your attention, right? And you realized, okay, I'm really good at focusing my attention on one thing. Mm-hmm. But as soon as like many people come in and a lot of people want something from me, I really cannot do it. Yeah, and that was the moment you failed.
You feel it. It's like utter panic to me. Well, are things where other people get a raised heartbeat, lots of stress. It's like super easy, right?
Yeah. Cool. And for you, Andries, what is your story?
Now he's there. Remembering basically my many of these Dutch careers start the same way. I ended up when I was that age at dishwashing, which is that's frowned upon, but I love that because it's basically just all the social stuff is away because there's no nagging colleagues, cooks or bartenders.
You're really in your zone, right?
And then the only thing is basically that you have to. There's just an inbox. That's basically the stuff that you have to dishwash, and there is an outbox.
The clean stuff.
The clean stuff. It's very simple task amount, but you basically are just in that zone and you're pounding away. And I really love that. It's like basically in the zone. And I later on I had the same kind of feeling, and you know what I'm talking about when you're coding. You're basically just in it, and you just stay in. And I really got addicted to that feeling, and also the subjective time perception in dishwashing is brilliant because you basically you almost died, but you dishwash for 6 hours. It's just one endless stream of dishes.
It's never ending, huh?
Wash, yeah. I almost miss it sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I think you can still.
Do you not do it at home?
You can time travel.
I actually contemplated basically just. I walked past by that restaurant just to ask them if I could do just one night, just to see how it would work, because I did it for quite a long time. Probably they will look at it. I'm crazy, but I can do it. Maybe I'll do it.
Yeah, maybe, Andries, it's time to try again. Yeah.
It's time to try again. Yeah.
Well, but I think your 2 stories nicely show that we are simply not made for excelling at everything.
Mm-hmm. No.
And our brains are just not wired that way, and that's perfectly fine. And I think there's an important story behind this, a message that we are all good at something. We're not good at everything. We are good at something. And it's important to know what that something is, to really figure out where we can thrive in. Also in a business setting, it's important for you to know what your colleagues are good at, or your athletes on the field. And this is exactly where the cognitive abilities can give a lot of insight. And I think it would be nice to now really go into how you turned your vision into action by, you already touched upon this, developing the Neurolympics. I like to call them 4 games for the brains.
Sure.
What are the Neurolympics? What do they measure?
So initially, we measure these cognitive functions, these executive functions inside an MRI machine. So you have people remember lots of information at the same time to keep it in their mind's eye, so to say. You can measure working memory capacity of them, processing capacity in that sense, if you would compare it to a computer. Then you consistently see that certain brain regions activate. And if you do that over and over in lots of individuals, hundreds of individuals, you see exactly the same brain regions prominently in the prefrontal cortex that are being activated by doing these kinds of cognitive tasks. So that's actually where it starts with all these different games, measuring processing capacity, processing speed, where you have some self-control, where you're flexible, mentally speaking, and how your attentional functions work. And the key feature that is very difficult here is that it needs to be fun. Right? So typically, if you're measuring cognitive abilities or executive functions inside an MRI machine, it's quite boring.
Yeah.
Like I tend to fall asleep within 10 minutes, even if it's my own functional MRI machine. I don't know if you fall asleep in an MRI, but
it's very mindful in being in seriously.
In a scanner.
People think that the scanner is there are always most people are a little bit
anxious the first time. Yeah.
But most of that disappears in 2 minutes. That's because of the repetitive noise, and there's a nice mattress.
I've never been in a scanner for brain purposes, but I've been doing professional sports when I was younger, and then I've seen the scanner a couple of times, but for like sporting injuries, it's a bit different.
So what we try to map that with brain imaging technique. So basically to sum it down, we did a lot of like academic research, and it's not only what we built upon the shoulders of giants, as they call it. There's tons and tons of academic papers behind that, and we use the best insights of that. We validated it ourselves with a neuroimaging technique, starting to translate that to tasks, only measuring behavior, and then gamifying that. And that was like the early pioneer work, attic room, as we say in Dutch, zolderkamer. We were pretty lucky that we had AZ, that's a football club, in the beginning, to start working with us so that we could also validate the things that we thought would work in that group specifically.
Yeah, and like if you then take the transition from football and applying these same games, comparing to standard intelligence tests that are still quite common in personnel selection, we saw like massive correlations. Like it's almost if you can perfectly predict traditional intelligence tests using these 4 games. This is like then you actually see that this is gold, right? Like I can say a lot about intelligence tests, and I'm not a great fan in that sense. But if you see correlations that are close to perfect between your set of games, cognitive games, and these intelligence test scores, then you see that this works much better than I would ever have expected in predicting, at least these mental aspects, and also relating to actual work behavior.
Yeah. And maybe for you out there, correlations mean that if you would take an IQ test to measure someone's intelligence, and then you would play the Neurolympics, you would get like super similar outcomes. Right.
Yeah. So that was basically the moment that we thought, oh, we're really onto something here. So we try to aim at these basic building blocks of cognition, right? Like these very simple things. Not
what are they?
A lot of IQ tests, and most people that know a little bit about these tests, and a lot of people have to do it, for instance, as an assessment, are like really complex puzzles or verbal analogies, finding the fourth word with 3 others, etc.
Yeah.
But we measured like really simple things. how fast can you respond to something that goes on the screen? Can you, if something on the left attracts your attention, are you then still, can you still respond to something on the right? Stuff like that. But we found that the combination of basically how well people are on these different factors could be used to both predict, for instance, your talent in to become a professional football player. Sorry, that's the Dutch. Or a traditional IQ, or your talent to be in air traffic control. All these different things, which are completely different.
And the crazy stuff. If you look at the police academy, are you built to become a drone operator or a special kind of task force in the police? So you can use it for all of these kinds of different jobs in that sense. And I think the beautiful thing about these games is, like, if you compare like typical tests that you get, then you have a bunch of questions that you need to answer. You need to reflect on yourself. Is this me? In which context would I be like that, or something different in, say, a personal context? You need to have sufficient language abilities and understand all these questions. And it's just usually plain boring to fill in answers to, say, 100 or 120 questions, right? So we don't have something that you fill in. You use 2 or 4 fingers to play games. So we actually measure your reactions in a gamified way. And you get this kind of natural flow. It goes along with a lot of cursing for people playing these games, but that's because they're really into the games usually.
That's basically a side effect of gamification. It's pretty engaging.
You want to play even longer, huh? Play more and more. So you could get, for example, the insight, I am good at like making decisions very fast, or I'm really considering a lot and don't want to make any mistakes, so I'm more precise but take longer to make a decision. A lot of these
things have trade-offs.
They have trade-offs. We think
so
of
for
dimensions.
Instance, a lot of things more nuanced if you really dive in, but there are these trade-offs. For instance, between having the tendencies to respond fast just to make decisions. But that most of the time comes a little bit at the cost of precision. Right? And people that are basically built for precision most of the times, not in all contexts, take a little bit more time. Similar with attention. That's basically also something that a lot of people would recognize in themselves. Some people are just very, very, very sensitive to like little things that change in the environment. Those are the people who cannot work in a office garden that well. But these, unlike Ilya, for instance, would see in the corner of their eye a person that might want to order a drink, right?
Here I am.
It's all about this match, right? So you could even get into like low vitality or well-being problems if you are in the wrong context and you just cannot work in a busy environment because you have to focus, and the context is too distracting for you. But that same kind of thing that would in that context be something that you don't want to be actually a sort of brain superpower in another context. It's all about this matching.
Well, the conclusion is, if you really want to know what the Neurolympics are all about, you should try it out yourself. But let's talk some neuroscience. Why is it, from a neuroscience perspective, so important that we work or play as an athlete in our, I would call it, cognitive sweet spot? So why is it so beneficial if what we're doing on a daily basis really matches our cognitive abilities? And how can it be harmful if we engage in tasks that don't come easy to us?
Well, I think, can I start with this one?
Sure.
I think if I relate that back to, for example, this open office example that you were referring to, if you have lots of trouble suppressing distracting information in your environment, your colleagues walking around or talking to each other, or a phone call, then you actually never really get into the flow of working on a document and to getting that task out there, right?
Yeah.
And that actually is not the right context, not the right environment where you can do your work. And we also do it to ourselves sometimes, like your phone rings, you're in the middle of your focus zone, and then you snap out of it again. And then it's like, oh, okay, where did that? What was the next step in what I was doing just a few seconds ago?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need even 20 minutes to get into the flow again.
Yeah.
So other people actually don't have that much of a problem with that, right? So
that's me, for example. I love having people around and going to these co-working spaces.
But you also see, so attention in general, this is just one of the things that we measure, right? But attention in general is under an extreme amount of stress since basically the smartphone, let's be honest, right? There was a time when we were young, we were just talking about it, that if you left for work, you were basically cut off
the grid. Yeah,
you were off the grid. You could read a paper, stare out the window.
Yeah,
and that took quite some time. It basically is wasted time now, but it's also that rest is needed. You need some alpha power, basically some mind-wandering stuff.
Definitely.
But some people
that's for everyone.
Suffer more from that than others. And that's basically with all the things. Like we had this example about attention and office space. It could also be, for instance, this other distinction that I made between speed and precision. Let's say you're a very thorough person, right? You want to get everything right. And then you end up, your company changes a little bit, and basically the pace needs to go up. It needs to be faster.
Let's get things done.
You can get to a point basically that you're working so much against your natural build-up that you start to you're not only not the ideal worker because you're just less good at it. It also can basically start eating you up. It's not healthy.
I would like to compare it to I think an example that we commonly describe is like if you're in a canoe, right? You can go downstream.
Yes,
and
that's very easy.
In line with, say, your natural cognitive abilities, and then it actually it just flows like that, right? It's with ease. If you would want to go upstream, for example, against, say, your natural cognitive abilities, you still might be able to do that. But it takes a lot of effort. And probably your energy is completely drained at the end of the day. So in some sense, some kind of alignment with your natural cognitive abilities and the work behavior that you actually need to show in daily life, it needs to align in some sense.
And that sounds a little bit vague, but this is exactly the problem. Basically, what we do is we try to measure independently and objectively what you are about. And a lot of these things, if you see our report, they are actually pretty intuitive, but you basically you need us to notice that. It's almost I often compare it to kids. For instance, you have a kid, I have two children, and then kids try different things like hobbies and sports and music. I don't know. And with a kid, it's pretty intuitive, right? So you say something like, "Okay, you're trying this to play the violin. I don't know. I don't know if you're happy about it.
You're definitely not happy about it.
and you like football very much, and that goes pretty well.
Yeah.
So maybe just play football and stop with the violin. As an adult, we actually are basically almost wired, or we have learned to focus on the things that we are not that good at, and then try to indeed upstream row to compensate for that. Go into learning and development, try to improve our X or Y skills, whereas actually you don't even realize that the things that you're very good at, for instance, organizing a party for colleagues or whatever. You think that's easy. I will do it because it's no work. But other people cannot do it.
For some people, standing at the bar is easy. Well, for you, it's very stressful.
And I think that's the beauty of it. So in some sense, like if you want to be efficient in terms of, say, your energy consumption and the ease with how you do things in your daily life, if it aligns with your natural talents, your natural brain talents, it's easy and you do better than everybody around you, right? You learn faster. And at the end of the day, you have massive amounts of energy to do other stuff.
Yeah. And it's rewarding, right? I mean, if we thrive at something, it's extremely rewarding. Yeah. While if we really try to do things that don't match our abilities, it can be draining, can be frustrating, can be tiring. Yeah. And also then negative emotions come into play, and it's just not
and of course, like from the standpoint, if you do something where you have a natural talent, right? Yeah. You actually, people around you see it, so you get this kind of positive spiral up, and they actually acknowledge, okay, you actually are great at this. You learn fast, so you get a lot of compliments. If you actually do the stuff that doesn't come natural to you, you get this kind of negative spiral. You need to try better. We need to talk about this. We need to review this and put in more effort. But if you are like a super fast actor in some sense, to do all these kind of meticulous precision things, well, it's just not your cup of tea.
No.
Yeah. And I think there's also an important message for if you're tuning in today as like a business manager or an HR recruiter, ultimately really knowing what your people are good at or could potentially be good at if you're looking for a new talent to join the team. Well, it will also be rewarding for your company, right? Or for your athletic club.
Absolutely.
And if I see it this way, like a team is only as good as its individual people, right? So if you have everyone in the right spot and you make sure, okay, this person really, we match with this job, it matches their abilities, well, your team will be better.
Absolutely.
And ultimately your business.
In the end, for a lot of things, like Ilya said, because we are actually trying to learn and to, when we execute actions, we monitor ourselves, we look at what we do, and we see that we succeed. We feel rewarded. People see it. They reward us through social channels. Basically, then it starts to work. Whereas now there's something like work, and then working on the things that you need to improve, and then compensating that with, I don't know, some sort of well-being program.
Yeah.
But anyway, we look at that way more. Actually simple, that it's just basically the alignment of what you do and what you're good at. If you improve that a little bit, also, for instance, start to understand each other more, because you are good at this, I'm good at that, then it starts working. And then not only do you feel better, but you're most importantly, your productivity is better. Yeah. Everything just basically improves.
The outcome will be better.
And like, if you actually realize this, that we are all differently wired in that sense and have different executive functions, different cognitive functions. Well, okay, we all have these functions, but they actually work slightly differently. Then you can actually understand why you think differently than I do, right? Like if I'm really working on programming code, for example, I'm fully absorbed. So if you ask me a question, I probably won't hear you. If you tap my shoulder and take me out of the flow, probably on autopilot, I can give you an answer. But if you ask me, can you please do this for me after you finish that? I'm on autopilot. So back to my task. I will never do what you asked because I basically continue. I'm in my focus zone. And for somebody else, this is unimaginable that you could work like that.
Yeah. And I think that's also so important when it comes to talent development. So let's say in any company or business, that you also know what each individual person in your team is good at, right? Because, or what they need. So you can really also give them more what they need, also allow them to thrive more.
We see actually there is this whole discussion, of course, which is fantastic about diversity and inclusion, which is most of the time about ethnicity and other kind of background things. We talk about cognitive diversity.
Love it.
So basically, just now, Ilya said, so this, what Ilya said is true about him. So basically, you shouldn't ask him if he's working because sometimes
I will never follow up on it.
Or he doesn't hear.
Send an email.
Conversely, he also said
ignores.
he just now said to me, maybe I should take care of the administration part in these kinds of projects. And then I said, yeah, you're right. Because he's just better at it. He's just better at it.
And you know each other well.
And it's not, and that's basically what I would call not cognitive diversity, which we have. We are not the same. It's cognitive inclusion, basically. That I'm proud of what I can do, and can dare to say it. But I'm also okay with the things that are not that natural for me. I'm not ashamed or whatever.
No.
It's okay.
And we are social beings. That's where we can complement each other. Otherwise, we could just do everything ourselves.
Well, I think the administration example is a good example. So I'm pretty good at that. Doesn't necessarily mean that I like to do it all the time, right? So like these natural ability or natural talents, well, it's enjoyable for some moment of time. Other people really hate it, but it's not my top priority.
No. But my whole point is that it's not only about recognizing your own talents and also weaknesses. But ideally, you come into a sort of cognitive culture or something that people are just completely okay with that, with their differences, and actually start using it, right? You start using it because then the shared productivity also goes up.
And now it actually works a bit like we all need to conform to the same way of working. So everybody is put into this what you call a straitjacket and comply with the way we all work alike. And if you work like that in, for example, a big organization, a big financial organization, and suddenly they decide, okay, from now on, we're going to flip, right? We're going to work in an agile way. For these people that are actually quite old, this taking up this new way of working and being all pushed into this kind of straitjacket, that will result in a massive loss of efficiency, I think. So should we not turn it around and see what people need to enable them to do their work more efficiently, to actually adjust the work, the regulations, the way of working to enable people, and of course some kind of protocol, routine, or straitjacket is probably needed, but we can be more flexible. Only if you're on an autism spectrum, or if you have a severe ADHD, for example, and you have this kind of label on it, then suddenly everything is possible to adjust the work, the tasks, the ways of working accommodate this. But we all, in certain extent, have this need for this personal treatment.
But I love this. This is some really deep, good insights. And I think it's again, touching upon everything is on a dimension, right? We're just better at some things and worse at some things. Not like all or nothing, like we don't have an attention or we have it all. And at some things we labeled, okay, ADHD, here's a label, but to really recognize on a daily basis that we all have shortcomings and weaknesses, but also talents, and how to incorporate that is, I think,
and if you like to do something, right? If you really like it and it's not your natural talent, you go upstream, perfectly fine, but don't go upstream all the time.
All the time, exactly.
You get very strong arms, but sometimes it's just nice to go with the flow and enjoy the view. And that's actually something we would like everyone to have, basically. And we think that we can provide a little bit of information there to help you out with that navigation.
Oh, I think it's amazing what we're doing with Brains First. And I think we're approaching the end of our episode slowly but surely. But no Olympic podcast would end without having a little cool down. So just as every Olympian would stretch their muscles after a heavy workout or competition, we want to make sure that we're preparing the brain cells to ease into a resting state and think about today's conversation. So as a last thing, let's do a little reflection. What is one key point from our conversation that you would maybe want to emphasize again or expand upon for our listeners to take home and remember?
Well, I think make good use of your brain, but relax too. Take breaks. Yeah. Take a shower, leave your phone at home, go walk in the forest, right? Mind wander. So in that sense, be smart with when you really put your brain to work and when to take breaks. I think that's key.
Very good. For you, Andries, you're looking like you're thinking hard.
I'm thinking maybe I can give a little a food for thought for the listeners. Basically, just think about the one thing that's basically repeatedly comes back in life. For instance, organizing things or making lists. That if you now look at it in hindsight, maybe actually. The way I see this as almost a mundane task isn't that ordinary. Maybe I'm just pretty good at it.
It's a special ability.
Others cannot excel in it. Yeah.
And that introspection, apart from doing our test, of course, might give you some insights for life. Actually.
Yeah. I think two very good key points to conclude with. Well, Andries and Ilja, thank you so much for coming on our episode today, on the very first episode here of the Neurolympics, and sharing your passion for the brain, your vision with Brains First, and how you turned that vision into great action with developing the Neurolympics that I'm sure we are already hearing a lot about, but will improve in the future and has some great I think things we can look forward to. So thank you for our conversation. And I hope that you are leaving us inspired today, that you're taking home some insights. And of course, we would love you to join the club and play our Neurolympics or try out a demo. If you visit our website, www.brainsfirst.com, you can book a demo and you can get in touch with us. And for next episode, we're planning on going beyond our conversation here and actually answering the question why you could simultaneously thrive as a bartender, but also as a school teacher. And if you want to have a peek into Ilja's and Andries' cognitive profiles, you should definitely tune in, because we will look at our founders' cognitive abilities to exemplify what you can practically gain from playing our Neurolympics. Well, we would love to see you more frequently on the Neurolympics, so please make sure you follow and subscribe on any platform that you are listening to from right now. And also, we would love to see you engaged, so please put any question, any remark, any insight in the comment section, and we would love to get in touch with you. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Neurolympics. Ciao, ciao.